In 34 years of performing, Steve Harvey has never walked off his own stage mid-show. Not during equipment failures. Not during bloopers that made the crew fall over. Not during contestants who wouldn't stop talking, no matter how many times he tried to move on. He walked off one time because a 5-year-old girl named Amara gave an answer to a simple question that nobody in that studio was ready for. And when Steve came back, he said to the audience, "I needed a minute. And I'm not sorry." Here is what happened. Emeka and Grace Okafor came from Charlotte, North Carolina. Emeka worked in it. Grace was a registered nurse. They had 2 children. Daniel, 10, who was quietly and mortifyingly more intelligent than most adults he met, and Amara, 5, who had, as her mother told the pre-production team, extremely strong opinions about everything, going back to approximately age 2. This was confirmed immediately upon Amara's arrival at the studio. She introduced herself to 3 separate crew members, 2 of whom had not been expecting to be introduced to anyone. She assessed the Family Feud set with the thoroughness of an inspector. She declared the buzzer sound satisfying. She noted that the lighting was a lot, but in a good way. When a production assistant tried to direct her to the waiting area, Amara looked at her and said, "I know where I'm going," and walked to exactly the right place. Steve Harvey, watching from the monitor in his green room, turned to his producer and said, "I want to talk to that one." His producer said, "Already planned." The Okafor family played a remarkable game. Grace had the buzzer instincts of someone who has learned to read situations quickly. Years of nursing, of scanning a room and knowing what's wrong before anyone says it. She was fast and accurate, and competed with a kind of focused calm that impressed Steve visibly. Emeka played with competitive intensity. He was deeply invested in winning, and found his son's relative lack of emotional investment slightly baffling. Daniel, for his part, was correct whenever he answered, which he did with minimal fanfare and one devastating observation. When Steve complimented his speed, Daniel said, "Well, it's a survey. You just have to think about what most people would think." Steve told him to slow down because he was making the other team feel bad. Daniel said, "Isn't that the point?" Steve Harvey looked at him for a moment. "I'm going to keep my eye on you." And then there was Amara. Amara played Family Feud as if the game had been designed specifically for her, and she had been studying for it her entire life. She buzzed in before questions were fully read. She gave answers that were philosophically arguable. When the question was, "Name something you do when you can't sleep," she buzzed first and said, firmly, "Think about the ocean." Not on the board. Steve asked if she wanted to elaborate. "I just think about the ocean," Amara said. "It's very big. It makes everything else seem small, and then I go to sleep." Steve turned to the audience. "She's right. She gets the points." The producers made a note. Nobody argued. The audience cheered. After the game, Steve sat with the family. Grace talked about nursing with a love that came through clearly. The exhaustion and the privilege. The strange gift of being present at people's most difficult moments. She mentioned that she had come home from a hard shift, once to find Amara had made her a card. The front said, "For Mama, because she saves people." Inside, Amara had drawn a stick figure in scrubs with a cape. She added the cape herself, Grace said. Emeka talked about coming to the United States from Nigeria for graduate school, the isolation, the culture shock, the long years of work, and meeting Grace. He talked about calling his mother in Nigeria when Amara was born. "My mother asked what name we had chosen," he said, "and when I told her, she made a sound I have never heard from her before or since. She said, 'You named her for the grace of God, And I thought, yes, that is exactly what we did. Daniel contributed commentary. Amara waited. Then Steve turned to her. Miss Amara, I have been watching you today. You are something special. Thank you, she said. I know, the audience laughed. Steve laughed. I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Don't worry about whether it's right or wrong. Just tell me what you really think. Amara nodded. What, Steve said, is the most important thing in the whole world? He was expecting something charming, something a child would say. Chocolate, dogs, a blanket, sunshine, something he could react to warmly and then move on. Amara looked at him. She didn't answer immediately. She sat with the question the way you sit with something you've thought about before and are deciding how to say. The pause was long enough that Steve tilted his head slightly. Making sure nobody cries alone, Amara said. Complete silence. Not the silence of confusion. The silence of an entire studio of people feeling something shift in their chest at exactly the same moment. Steve Harvey didn't move. His mouth was slightly open. He looked at this 5-year-old in a purple dress who had been arguing about ocean therapy 30 minutes ago. Say that again, he said quietly. Making sure nobody cries alone, she repeated, with the patience of someone who has learned that adults sometimes need things twice. Steve Harvey stood up. He turned to the audience, briefly, and the look on his face was not one anyone in the room had a framework for. Not grief, not joy. Something in between that doesn't have a name. He said, Give me a second. And he walked off stage. He went to the wing, past the cameras. A producer started to follow. Steve held up one hand. A single gesture, not yet. He stood in the wing for just over 3 minutes. The studio did not go to a break. The audience did not grow restless. They sat, all of them, in the particular shared silence that happens when a group of people simultaneously understands that they are witnessing something that should not be rushed. Grace had her hand over her heart. Emeka looked at the floor. Daniel was looking at his sister as if seeing her fully for the first time. Amara sat in her chair, feet not touching the ground, and waited. Untroubled, as if she had said something completely obvious, and the reaction, while large, was also, to her, logical. Steve Harvey came back. His eyes were different. Not wet, altered. The way eyes look after something real has moved through them. He sat down across from Amara. Where did you learn that? He asked. From Mama, she said. When Daddy's grandma died, Mama sat with him all night so he wouldn't cry alone. And I saw it. She looked at Grace, then back at Steve. And I thought, that's the most important thing. You can't stop sad things, but you can make sure the person isn't alone when they happen. Steve Harvey sat with this. I've been thinking about that my whole life, he said finally, and I never found the right words for it. You just gave them to me. He looked at Grace and Emeka. I don't know what you're putting in the water at your house, but I need the recipe. The audience laughed, warmly, fully. I need you to know something, Steve said to Amara. When I walked off stage just now, I wasn't sad. I just needed somewhere quiet to hold what you said, because it was too big for this room. Amara considered this. That makes sense, she said. Sometimes I go in my closet and just sit. Me too, Steve said softly. Me too, baby. The phrase making sure nobody cries alone spread across the internet for weeks. It appeared in grief counseling materials, church bulletins, staff meeting slides, cross-stitched on fabric, tattooed on wrists. A nonprofit was founded bearing Amara's answer as its mission. Volunteers trained to sit with isolated elderly people during hard times. Within 6 months, 9 states had chapters. A grief counselor in Ohio wrote about the clip professionally, the simplest, most complete definition of compassionate presence she had ever encountered. And it came from a 5-year-old. Amara, informed of all this impact in a follow-up video her parents posted, listened carefully, then said, "But it's just the most important thing. Everybody knows that." And went back to coloring. Share this with the person who has made sure you didn't cry alone. And tell us in the comments, who has been that person for you?